It is necessary for the recording of sound to convert the sound waves to corresponding changes in light. The sound waves produced by my voice are transmitted through the air to the microphone, where these sound waves are converted to changes in an electric current. These variations in the electric current are then amplified and used to control the light. This varying beam of light falling on the photoelectric cell produces variations in the electric current, which are directly proportional to the variations in the light beam. The sound track. As the varying electrical current in the photoelectric cell is small, a vacuum tube amplifier is required to increase it to the point where it will operate a loudspeaker. Soundtrack.
Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Today I'm very excited to get both of these guests on together at once. I have had both of them on my show in the past. Just recently, I had Megan on from 7 Degrees of Wisdom, and I thought we hit it off great. And I really wanted to get her on with Mario, which has been on the Occult Rejects before. Mario from Symbolic Studies. If you have not seen him on the Occult Rejects, I highly suggest to go to that episode. I did some killer stuff with tarot, and that's why I had to get him on again. So, yeah, I guess we'll just start it from here. Megan, real quick, would you like to let everybody know what you're about, where they can find your stuff, you know, all the things?
Yeah, so I'm a practicing occultist, and I have my own business. So I'm an intuitive tarot reader, and I teach a lot of different classes on varying different occult subjects. You can find me on Instagram. That's my main. It's the number 7 and then Degrees of Wisdom. Nothing at the end, no dashes, no 01 or anything like that. I've had some people try to copy my account several times. And I also read in person at 2 shops here in Fort Smith, Arkansas. Timeless Oddities and Curiosities and Welcome Home Metaphysical Shop. That's where I read on Sundays and Mondays, but I also do online readings too if anybody's interested in that as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I guess both of you must be doing something right if people are faking accounts. Because I know it's been done to Mario before.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, he said a fake account actually got one of my listeners. I was like, oh. And when they told me how much they paid, I was like, I could have told you that wasn't Mario. That's totally different prices.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. So, and now on to Mario from Symbolic Studies. Would you like to let everybody know where they could find the one and only Mario from Symbolic Studies and all the services and stuff that you do as well?
Yeah, sure thing. You can find me at symbolicstudies.com. I would say YouTube is one of my hubs. So that's at Symbolic Studies, and then Instagram, symbolic.studies. And I, for a while, what I was doing is I was following each sign during the sign itself, making content around that sign. So right now I've put out some videos and have done some live stream presentations around the Emperor, because of its connection with Aries. And then I've also, I'm prepping right now actually for a presentation on Mars. I'm going to be doing that here pretty soon. And so that's kind of my thing, but I like to explore symbolism beyond the zodiac and beyond, the planets and everything else. So I'm kind of branching out into other topics that way. But I'm a graphic designer of 20 years, so my eye is definitely kind of tuned into symbolism, visual symbolism.
Yes.
And so that's really what I like to talk about. So it was kind of a natural fit that I would find the tarot. So if people are interested in tarot, astrology, symbolism in general, I think they would like my stuff. I, too, do tarot readings and consultations and things like that for people, but you can find everything on my website.
Very good, very good. And links to both of your stuff will definitely be in the bottom with the show as well for anybody listening. I will even have to say, to an extent, I have a lot of things I plan on trying to do over the summer with my show. And in a way, you've actually inspired me a little bit, Mario, because I actually want to go out and start filming occult architecture and art. And showing it, and it's because I have seen you kind of do the same thing on your own page at times. Sometimes you'll show some type of art or something and you'll point out, references to occult architecture. And I was like, there's so much of that stuff, I think, in our faces that we don't normally realize. Or we'd never know, like, oh,
Agreed.
it's right there, and down in the middle of town. Walk past it every day, no idea. This shit's been on our faces for hundreds and hundreds of years in buildings and art.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of Freemasonic lodges around here, and we have in Fort Smith. There's this one. It's called Temple Live, and they use it for like music festivals and stuff now. But it's got the sphinxes right in the front. It's got the Rosicrucian roses capping the top of the building. It's got. I drive by it like damn near every day, and I love just like looking at it. And I'm like, I know what that is. I know what that is, and it's really cool.
Nice. And
exactly.
I'm going to, if just for the people listening, we will have. We're going to cover like the tarot. We're probably going to jump around. We're not going to go in order, but I would like to, out of however takes and how many episodes it takes to do this, try to cover the major arcana with both of these guests, just from our opinions and our takes on it. This episode, just because I'm going to totally admit it, last time Mario was on, he had this whole 2-camera setup, and I was just like, oh, he'll probably do that again, but unfortunately his internet is down. Mm-hmm. So what I will do, Megan will be holding up the cards, but post-production, I will throw up the cards, rearrange the cameras, and make it look very nice and pretty. But if you're listening, it would help to probably watch. So that was another reason why I wanted to mention that real quick. This may be a visual series instead of an audio, but, whatever. And yeah, I guess we'll just get started there. I guess, Megan, since you're the one with the cards that you're going to be holding up, it's up to you. I guess you want to pick which one, and and then we'll also go off of what Mario had planned as well.
Okay, so let's start with the full card. This is the Thoth deck. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go ahead and, Mary, you can start off with that.
Yeah, I might even bring that up on the screen because I do have that one saved.
Cool. So, I mean, gosh, already there's every single card really is a deep well of information, right? So sometimes it's funny just to kind of, if you're going to go and do a quick sort of review of it, like what do you pick and choose? The thing I think about right now is I really feel as though the whole major arcana is actually an expression of, I would say, the Taurus field or the Bull of Heaven, the world tree or the cosmic tree sort of thing. And so there's this idea of I've heard it be called a run and return. There's always the constant sort of like projection and reception sort of thing going on. When you study the Taurus field, you'll notice that this is kind of the thing that the whole pattern of the Taurus field is all about, is that there's energy being projected forth, but then also returning back to itself, right? Like a donut. And so to me, when you're talking about the Taurus field, you're talking about an exterior, and then you're talking about the interior as well, but it's the same system. And so I think the Fool, to me, as an expression of the Taurus field, is kind of the totality of everything. So it's the zero, right? It's almost like everything and nothing at the same time. Whereas I would say that the Magician card would be the middle point of the Taurus field. So in a way, I think a really simple glyph that relates to the whole major arcana is the circumpunct, which is the circle with the dot right in the middle, which is the, the symbol for the sun now. And so I would say the Fool is kind of an expression of the totality of that glyph of the circle. And then the Magician card, actually, by being the one, is kind of that point right in the middle. And you have that contrast between 0 and then 1. And if people have been watching my work, especially my presentations, I keep on going on about this idea that a lot of symbolism breaks down to poles and holes.
Yes.
And so it's very sexual. So it's very phallic and feminine and everything else. So the Fool would be that receptive sort of quality, in my opinion, versus the Magician's projective quality. And he's holding that wand, right? That projective force, that phallic sort of object in his hand. And you could even see here with the nature of the design, Crowley and Lady Frida Harris, they created that shape, right? That's also echoed in the last card in the major arcana, the universe. So you have that oval sort of shape, which is very, very similar to that 0. And to me, this receptive or whole-like quality is kind of echoed in the fact that the Fool looks like he's falling. And also, right, in traditional decks, a lot of people have said that it kind of looks like the Fool might be walking off of a cliff, that there's that potential there. And I've seen other cards where he's literally free falling right off that cliff, or he has 1 foot kind of going off that cliff. And so to me, this is more of that, there's kind of like this emptiness, or there's kind of this, but yet this holistic sort of thing going on with this card. Whereas I think the Magician kind of fills that space in a lot of ways. So again, it's kind of like the whole followed by the pole, which you'll see in the Magician card. But this card corresponds with Aleph, which means ox, and an ox. One important thing to note about the ox is that an ox is actually a castrated bull. And so that means that they're, you know, more easily tamed, basically, and domesticated and everything else. But to me, there's like a sacrificial sort of thing kind of going on there with that whole dynamic. And then also it's kind of a tradition for the Fool to also be kind of effeminate as well in a lot of ways. And so I think that that's kind of an important aspect of the card. And also, I think it's interesting too, like you'll see down below that alligator or that crocodile. To me, this is definitely a reference to, I guess, what might be called like a Typhonian sort of deity, kind of like a chaos deity or like an underworld sort of deity. And so there's kind of a primordial sort of thing going on with the Fool as well, which makes sense given the fact that it's the first card, it represents 0, you know, and everything else.
You know, it makes me think of like almost like H.P. Lovecraft kind of, but you know, it's not some you know 10 arms, you know, beast in the water, but you know, almost like the same thing being represented there. You know, like you said, the chaotic, you know, waters and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. You totally got it, man. 100%. And so a lot of the myths associated with these deities, they pull people under. And that it's my kind of impression or interpretation that before the underworld or adversarial figure was associated with being underground and being associated with fire and brimstone, they were actually associated with being underwater. And so there's a few kind of remnants of this, I think, a few leftover kind of artifacts that was the case. I think one of them is the fact that Capricorn is a sea goat, right? And so you have that oceanic sort of thing with Capricorn, but then also the Capricorn sign is associated with the devil. And so obviously with the devil, you have that adversary. Devils oftentimes are holding that pitchfork, which is really just a trident. And so I think that a lot of underworld adversarial figures were underwater. And then at some point, it seems as though they became a little more terrestrial and got associated with being actually like underground, you know.
Have you ever thought if the trident is more of just the poles and holes symbolism?
Oh, yeah.
Because I thought it was interesting that you said poles and holes to begin with, because I've been kind of getting into, like, I'm going to be working on a series where, like, we're showing, in my opinion, how some occult symbolism is even, like, inside of our head. And when you start talking about the eyes, you got you got rods and cones in there. So I do wonder if it even gets into that itself. But besides that, when you said that too, it makes me think of like ones and zeros with binary.
That's it. Exactly. 100%, dude. It's fascinating because the bigger, larger correspondence is that pole is the world axis, you know. So whether you believe in a heliocentric reality or a geocentric reality, the world axis has played a much bigger role, I think, in occultism than what a lot of people give it credit for, because most people aren't even aware of a world axis. But the world axis would be under heliocentrism. It's the pole. It's the point in which the world spins. You know, it's what it revolves around. So that would be the world axis from South Pole to the North Pole. And by extension, the North Pole goes up to, or at least the world axis extends from the North Pole to the northern sky and hits the pole star, Polaris, the North Star. And this is the star that the heavens revolve around. So there is this ancient concept that there was literally a cosmic axis, or the trunk of a cosmic tree or world tree, that everything revolved around. And so when you're dealing with an axle, or you're dealing with this whole entire concept, you have that pole, but then there's also been this idea that there's a hole right there as well. Either, at the poles, this is kind of a classic sort of thing. But in particular, the North Pole, that there is a receptive quality and there's a projective quality at the North. And so this is a big part of my sort of, recent research, I guess. Northern symbolism, sacred center symbolism, world axis symbolism, and whatever.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, so
that's interesting. I even brought that up. I mean, I could have been totally off, and maybe Sam Smith really isn't that deep of a thinker, but even in his performance, that Sam Smith performance that he did recently, there was, I'm watching the hand signs and movements and everything. And there's a time where I think he does the Kabbalistic cross, but then he also goes like this. And I was like, yo, was that like the axis of the earth that he just drew right there?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, it was just really weird. I was like, that's the axis. So, it may not have been for that, but that's what it looked like he drew to me, so...
It all goes back to sexual symbolism. It again, poles and holes. Where does life come from? And so to me, if you boil a lot of things down to like the nuts and bolts of symbolically what they represent, not all the time, but I would say that a lot of the times it's actually really surprising how much the pole and hole kind of dynamic actually shows up. So I'm starting to see that all over the tarot. In a lot of different ways. And like I said, I think that there's a correspondence with the Taurus field as well. So that central sort of point in the Taurus field, that would be the pole and the hole, basically. But I'm curious what Megan thinks about the full card.
Real quick, that's funny how we've actually kind of come across the same idea and haven't told each other.
Interesting.
In the same time, too. I just find that stuff to be weird sometimes. It's almost like... Is there something out there just for people to grab onto when they're ready for it? I don't know. It's just weird.
Right. No, exactly.
So go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
So I'm not super familiar with the Thoth deck. I just recently picked it up, and I haven't had time to really take a deep dive into it. I mean, I've thumbed through it a few times. There's a lot going on in this card. I mean, you've got the first thing I notice is the sun, in the middle there, in his crotch, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I know that he relies heavily on sexual symbolism. And then the other thing that I noticed is so you have what the full card essentially means is, you're going on the fool's journey. You're starting the journey to initiation, right? So another thing that I noticed here in this card, is the Rosicrucian flower there, and then he's got some stems coming off of it, and he's got two or three smaller ones, and then he's got another one growing off of it too. So that has a lot of symbolism in it as well. And so just like in the Rider-Waite, you have the white rose that he's holding on to as well, which represents, purity and kind of going into things with a naivety, if you will, right? Because it's always that way. I'm curious, Mario, do you practice high magic, or are you familiar with ceremonial magic or any of that stuff?
I'm more so familiar, but I'm not a practitioner or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a lot going on in this card. The first thing that stood out to me, obviously, he's transferred over the yellow, which is yellow, is air. Air represent intellect. So you've got a lot of that. I like how he, transferred the colors over, because colors, have a lot of meaning in themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also it looks like he's got some alchemical or astrological symbols there in the back. And I'm trying to count how many he has. And I like that he put them in a rose formation as well. And I think, yeah, I don't know if you can notice those in the back there.
Yeah.
And then
it's almost even in that Rosicrucian sigil thing that you have, right? Or the golden one. Yeah, I didn't even realize.
Yeah, so I'm talking about the coins he has there. I can't really see if they're in a sack, or maybe it looks like
they're in a sack, and it looks like a bunch of astrology symbols.
Yeah. I'm kind of trying to figure out what's up there on the left-hand corner, right above the. Is that a diamond? Is that what that is?
Those look like grapes,
think so.
Maybe. Oh, yeah.
On the left-hand side?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a dove there, that's the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They use that a lot too, the dove, and we're familiar with that symbolism.
EOTO Laman too. They got a dove doing that.
Yeah, it's everywhere, all over anything Crowley does. He likes to put that dove in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got grapes. I'm assuming those are grapes and a maple leaf. So there is quite a bit going on here. I will also comment about the face of this fool. He's got horns on, and it looks like his, nose and mouth is more pig. So I don't know if he meant to transfer that across or not.
I didn't even know.
And then, of course, you've got the butterfly, and then you have the caduceus as well. And then there's a lot of Egyptian themes in here as well, too. So it looks like I love his different take on it, right? There's a lot going on here, and to the untrained eye, you're just looking at this going, well, what is all this, right? But
you even see like almost like with the dove into the other bird into the butterfly, and then the caduceus.
Yeah, so this card is a card of transformation.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what I think he was trying to get across here, was transformation. I mean, when you become an initiate, when you get into the occult and you start studying the tarot and the tree of life and the Kabbalah and all that stuff, if you're practicing high magic, I mean, this is easily decoded if you start getting into it. But yeah, there's quite a bit going on in this card.
You know what I wanted to ask you both? Do you think now on a lot of full cards I have seen sometimes dogs, but now you also have that other thing on the bottom. I know like maybe a dog isn't like the best thing to use. I mean, the name of it backwards would be God, so I do find that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But have you ever thought like maybe these are almost like even beast symbolism in itself, like the male energy? Because like I could even see the maple leaf representing a tree, male phallic energy. It's growing straight up,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there is actually a lot of kind of like beast symbolism in this itself.
Yeah, sure. No, I could see that. And the dog too has, I think of Anubis, and I think of them guarding the gates, to the underworld, and that. And so there's like an underworld sort of thing with dogs. No, I think that's a really good point regarding the beast symbolism, because obviously Crowley, he referred to himself as the beast, the great beast, and everything else. And there's other cards that are definitely about like taming your beast and refining, your inner beast and things like that. But the thing that kind of reminds me of that I want to point out is that I really feel like the juxtaposition, the contrast from the Fool to the Magician, especially in the Thoth deck, to me, the vibe that I get is that this card, the Fool, also represents chaos, and the Magician represents order. And so order ab chaos, order out of chaos.
Yeah.
And so this is the idea, according to my research, there are several myths. I did a presentation on Ovid's Metamorphoses, and he gets into this whole idea of God separating the elements, that the early primordial universe, all of the elements were kind of amalgamated together in what he kind of referred to as a cosmic heap. All of the elements, there was no separation between anything. It wasn't until God separated the elements, until the world axis or cosmic axis came into existence, did the elements actually have space to play and combine and break down and all of these different types of things. And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing. You're seeing kind of like a metaphor for chaos. And then the Magician with his wand, with that cosmic axis, he's separating things. He's connecting the above with the below, but he's also separating the above and the below. It's an as above, so below reference, which is what Baphomet does and a bunch of other figures have done, right?
Yes.
And so you also generally, in front of the Magician, you have the Magician's table, and he has an object that represents the four elements. So he has swords, right? Thank you. Swords and, cup and a disc and everything else. And so everything is orderly. So you're seeing order, basically. And I did a presentation on this called Decoding Chaos. If people want to check that out, they can. So I think that's kind of what's going on here, is order out of chaos. Order being the Magician, and then chaos being the Fool.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly how it is too. When you're learning all this stuff and you start to practice and you start to get control of energies, which involves elements and all that type of stuff. Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you on all that.
Nice.
Yeah, it is that first card in the Thoth deck is pretty chaotic. It's got a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, with the tiger, how he's trying to bite his leg and stop him from kind of going over that edge, right? Trying to stop him from, the 3D realm, the low vibrational 3D realm that's trying to keep him rooted and not let him kind of go off and do his own thing and kind of learn everything. And I think the alligator is more like it represents the lower self, the self that we are before we start to figure things out and become initiated. That's my thought on that. And yeah, it is that card is very chaotic. It's quite different from the Rider-Waite, for sure. And then you have more, like if we look at the Magus card, right, for the Thoth deck, it seems like it's a little more comprehensive, you know, compared to this one too, right? So you got, oh, my screen's backwards. This is hard. So yeah, so this one, you know, compared to this one, right? It shows a little bit more order to it. Like he's kind of got shit figured out, right? So I think that, you know, he's got it figured out a little bit better. So, you know, when he's raising up and then he's got one hand up and one hand down, he's got his wand, he's bringing the, you know, as above, so below symbolism. And also with the roses that go across and come down, that to me, that's some more pillar symbolism that I look for in the Rider-Waite. There's quite a bit of cards that have that pillar symbolism, and with him being the middle pillar of the Tree of Life. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yep.
And then, of course, you know, you always have the white lilies that are present. And that always represents like purity. And then he's also got some color thrown in with the flowers as well. And he's got everything laid out on the table there for him. So the magician to me is learning how to shape your reality the way you want it. So he's a master manifester. He's got all the suits at his disposal to kind of use to kind of start to bring the above down below so that he knows how to work with things, right? And kind of shape his reality into what he sees fit. With a Fool, he has no idea about any of that, period. Like all he knows is that he's got to jump off that cliff and take that leap of faith. And he has no idea what's going to happen, but he knows that divinity is going to be there to catch him, right? The magician, he's taken that leap of faith, and now he's grounded in this reality. And now he's got to figure out how to figure a way to get back up the tree, right? Ascending through the major arcana. But that's kind of my input on that.
No, that's great. The other thing that I'm thinking about too, you pointed out the coins in that bag. It's just interesting that those coins represent the different signs of the zodiac, right?
Yeah,
and
that's because I can see Gemini and I can see Aries and Taurus and everything now.
And then I could see like Venus and Mars and things like that. So this is the idea that I was referring to, this chaotic sort of thing where everything was together. So there's no order. Right. And so some of the older artworks that depict like an early chaos, it'll show all of the signs kind of in different positions, and it's not in a wheel. And so there's no order to anything. There's not that cosmic axis to give order to things, basically. And that's what the cosmic axis or world axis, that wand, phallic symbolism, what it represents is that actually it brings stability and it brings order to a situation, ideally. And so it also can bring tyranny, and, you know, there's a shadow side to it as well. But that's what you're seeing. You're seeing all of these planets and all of these signs, and they're in this bag. And to me, what this bag also represents, because it's way more obvious in the Rider-Waite version of the Fool, right, where he holds that bag at the end of that stick there, that I see mercurial symbolism everywhere. Mercury is like a shapeshifter. He's very fluid. He's masculine and feminine. And so I see him everywhere. Honestly, it's kind of crazy. I see him being associated with like all of the signs and so many different cards. There's some cards where it's very overt and obvious and very clear, like the Magician. But this is a hermetic system, as in Hermes, you know. And so this is that bag of Hermes, you know. He's also a messenger. He's also a traveler, you know, Mercury is. And so I think there's a mercurial aspect to the Fool as well. And then here, this Fool in the Thoth deck, he's wearing green, and green is like the heart chakra, you know, it's the middle chakra sort of thing out of the traditional 7. And there's so many things that relate to Mercury that way. You know, Wednesday being the day of Mercury, it's in the middle of the week. That's just one example. You mentioned that middle pillar there with the Magician. That's another example. He's always like emblematic of like this middle way sort of thing. But green also being the color of nature. And then it also reminds me of the fact that, you know, the color emerald is very much related to Mercury, as in the Emerald City, you know, of the Wizard of Oz, which is like the sacred center of Oz. And he's like the mercurial character, you know, in the film, or the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, right? Thoth would be the correspondence with Mercury and things like that. So I get a heavy mercurial vibe now that I'm revisiting things with the Fool as well.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention something about the coins again. This is just my take on it. I could be completely wrong, but sometimes I do think that, you know, they say are ruled by, you know, these zodiacs or whatever. You know, they're ruled by this planet or ruled by that planet. Sometimes I wonder if those are like, if that's like kind of almost telling you like the vice or like in Kabbalah, how there's like vices and virtues. I do wonder, like, if there's actually, like, I know as crazy as it sounds, like some spiritual vibrational control that maybe you actually have to break out of. And I'm just wondering if, like, he has all those symbols with him, because, like, they're no longer ruling him. He's got them in his bag now, you know. And the same thing you said with Mercury, I was going to bring that up too. I know yellow, I mean, that would go with air, which would go with Hode, where Mercury and Thoth would fall. You get a lot of that, and, you know, honestly, his green outfit, which is exactly what's across from him over by Netzach. I do think you will see kind of like Thoth, or the male energy, done on Sphere 8, 4, 2, and the Fool. So I could see, like, maybe it's showing, like, the bottom part of the tree rising up to the top now. In a sense. Like, so, the bottom two spheres that were lower are now risen above, in a sense.
Gotcha, yeah. Mercury rules, and Venus, they both rule 2 signs traditionally. So Mercury rules Virgo, which is an earth sign, and Gemini, which is an air sign. So the air correspondence with Mercury, obviously, is totally there and present as well, which I think that diamond also probably represents. I can see the air symbolism with the diamond, and then from there you have the dove and what looks like to me a vulture, and then also that butterfly. And then clearly, too, that caduceus sort of winged disc right there, too, to the right of those birds. You know, very, you know, hermetic symbol, very much related to Mercury. And I always interpret, to me, the Kundalini serpents, or the twin serpents, going up the world axis, similar to Mercury going up the cosmic axis to access different realms. You know, it's like a bridge to other places and whatnot. So that's kind of what I see with that.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, I mean, even with all the birds, I mean, and all these flying things, you should just assume air is, you know, obviously an element being shown in this card. Awesome. All right, I'll go on to, I guess the next one would be now the Magician. Here we go.
Nice. So yeah, I love this card so much. So to me, I just have to acknowledge the fact that this world axis that I'm referring to, this cosmic axis, is literally visible and present in this card. That is the pole behind the Magician. So there it is, right behind him. And so, again, poles and holes. And so this world or cosmic axis helped separate the elements and gave us space for things to grow and decay, and for the whole rhythm and cycles of life to occur here. You know, that's how I interpret it, at least. So he's literally right in front of the world axis. There is a lot of symbolism related to the world or cosmic axis that corresponds with one-leggedness, or, related to a single foot or even a thigh. This is a whole rabbit hole, which is fascinating. But the fact that he chose to put the Magician on like a tippy toe sort of stance, almost like a ballerina or something like that, is very much symbolic of spin. It's also symbolic of balance and like the turning of the cosmos, basically. Of what?
Goats do that too. They can like balance on dental floss as they climb mountains.
It's true. Yeah, exactly. And so, so to me, that's very much apparent that this is a cosmic world axis sort of thing, at least in my opinion. And then that's also mirrored with the fact that it's number 1. And number 1 is literally just a straight vertical line, you know? And so just the phallic symbolism is definitely present. And Mercury, Hermes, there's a lot of, statues and works of art where they're very much related to the phallus as well. So to me, this is very much a phallic card in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And the fact that in the Rider-Waite, he's holding that wand, right? And so to me, when you're looking at wand symbolism, it's related to that as well. You're directing your magical energy. And I did a presentation called The Magician's Wand where I get into some of this stuff.
Yeah, I see, like, even the colors that it uses, mainly like yellow and blue. You know, that's very like, makes me think of like Jupiter, and really Hode again, like those types of, Chesed, or Hode, or Jupiter and Mercury is kind of being symbolized here in a sense again over, I think.
Yeah.
No, you know what
And
I did
then-
want to mention before, and this kind of, I guess maybe I left it out because I didn't want to take it too deep. But like, I think this card actually may even like kind of go along with what I was thinking a little bit more. That diamond that was up in the corner, I do also wonder if that just is to represent light reflection. Which then in this card, you're seeing tons of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you there.
Yeah, that's
He's
it.
got
Again,
another
going with
dove
the
there at the top as well, coming down, through his crown.
Yeah. I mean, just again to go along with the poles and rods, like I was even
So
saying
what
with
is
the
that right
eyeballs.
above the 11-pointed star? That's what I can't figure out what that is. It looks like the pentacles, right? And yeah, like that right there. That's right above that. Like, what is that?
I think it's supposed to be symbolic of, well, I don't know. It kind of looks like fire to me. A little bit.
That's what I thought, right?
That, but because fire's associated with wands, though.
Exactly. Yep. And then you got that wand above it, or the little scepter.
So, and like, is that a baboon there?
Oh,
below it?
Let me check.
Yeah.
Just trying to pull up the
Yeah. It's an ape or a monkey.
Oh yeah.
I always have questioned kind of Crowley because he was so high all the time.
Yeah.
And you're like, and maybe it's just some shit that he's seen, and maybe it really doesn't have a meaning. He just decided to throw it in there. I don't know.
You know what?
Like,
Believe it. I think monkeys are used a lot actually in occult influence. I mean, in occult symbolism.
Well, I mean, just like in general, I just kind of, I've always just like, I would love to get like deep in his head, to find out like what he was really thinking.
You may not
like
want
what all this stuff.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not knocking it, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Crowley contributed a lot to the occult world. I'm not knocking
Oh,
it at
yeah,
all.
for sure. No, I say that all the time.
I'm just saying, like, I read a bio on him recently. Like, and it was like probably like 20 pages or more. And I was reading, like, that dude was constantly high or withdrawing or sick, like all the time. And so it's kind of, I'm just curious to see if, like, if obviously the drugs influenced his symbolism, for sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No one's above criticism, and when it comes to these types of figures, it's worth questioning what they're putting out there for a whole host of reasons. But my understanding of the reason why he would put this in here, it's more just kind of like filling in the gaps, like I think with a couple different things. But in the Vedic pantheon, Hanuman is like their monkey ape deity, and he's the correspondence for Mercury in their way of looking at everything. And so Hanuman is like the monkey is a mercurial figure, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that. I wasn't knocking the monkey.
Yeah,
I'm just
totally
knocking it in general. Like, I know everything has a meaning, right? I get it.
Yeah.
But I was just kind of curious as to how much that affected, his work and what he was doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Because he's coming from a different perspective that's not normalized. When somebody that's analyzing his work is seeing it from a whole different perspective, it can kind of look kind of like, there's like a lot going on. And it's just, I don't know. That's a whole nother show in itself. But I just wanted to mention that.
To add to your point, a lot of his acolytes, a lot of his followers or students or whatever have a very hard time questioning him, and have a very hard time kind of going there with his work and stuff. Because I think it's healthy, and I've tried to talk to other people. I think maybe we talked about this the last time I was on.
Probably.
But a lot of his followers and stuff, if you go to certain groups and start bringing up stuff about Crowley the man and wanting to know like where he was at with everything, a lot of them are very tight-lipped. They don't want to go there. They just want to talk about his teachings. So just to add to your point, that I think he's worth being skeptical of.
Oh, of course.
Personally, but not everyone feels that way. But yeah, so I'll say too, also the magician, the magus, M-A-G, I have to bring up the fact that MAG relates to magnetism as well. And when you're dealing with magnetism, you're dealing with polarity. There's that pole word again.
Magic.
So literally magic, right? The positive and the negative. So when you're holding up a wand, like the traditional magician here, it's like it's also alluding to polarity, and it's alluding to the fact that you can attract but also repel things based on your sort of understanding of the natural world and whatnot. And it like has to do with your powers. So there's going to be points in time in your life where you want to repel people or energy.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be parts in your life where you're going to want to attract things. So this all has to do with magnetism. And magnetism, you know, where would we be without it? And so our color spectrum, right? It's the electromagnetic spectrum. So it's electricity and magnetism play a very big part in magic and just kind of our reality, right?
Thank you, Mario. I was glad you said that because I've been saying that for a while. I think sometimes people think you're crazy. It's like, no, I think it's just quite blatant. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just the deal.
I mean, even look about what I was saying before with thinking the diamond had something to do with light reflection. And then you're talking about magnetism and reflecting or absorbing stuff. I mean, a magnet could do that with light as well.
It could also represent different dimensions as well.
Yeah. So,
you know, we want to go down that road as well. And like, you know, when you start to practice, they say you're like a diamond in the rough, and then you find all these different facets, and then it makes you and molds you into who you are, and you become hardened to it.
Now,
right.
I did want to ask you both up here. Again, that even looks like the dove that we originally saw in the Fool, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And then the color purple, I wonder if that, I mean, as you're falling down the tree at the top, I guess you are working your way closer to Saturn. Like, if you think about where this card falls, it's kind of, I guess, on its way to Saturn. You know, so, like, I mean, there is purple in there, too, as well, and black.
And it could also represent, you know, the crown chakra or third eye chakra. You know, you could have that as well for the purple. That's what it makes me think of.
I mean, even talking about magnetism, I mean, this looks like even the snake. Even the
if you
snake
notice,
looks like
he's
a
got
magnet.
the purple on the top and the bottom. Like, almost like he brought it down through him. Okay, like down to this realm through, you know, your crown chakras where you receive all your information. That's when you practice magic, where you're pulling everything from down through there and into your heart chakra. Or, you know, when you do different types of work, you know, like the LBRP and, you know, all those different types of energy work, when you're working with that stuff, you're bringing things from different areas. And that's also like all the lines that are in this as well. That's what it kind of reminds me of. Like when you're doing your invocations or a kind of energy work, you're kind of pulling everything down from the top down. And that's another thing that, you know, the magician card represents is as above, so below. So he's got all these lines, right? And it looks a lot like abstract art. That would also something be worth exploring too, to me. So I think all those lines in the refraction. Oh, okay. Something just hit me. So you know how he has the diamond in the previous card, right?
Yes.
And then he's got this one next, and it's like all the refractions are coming down from everywhere at different points. So that you could also say that as well. But to me, the lines represent different dimensions, different facets of energy coming from different areas. So, but it all seems to be centered around his head, like coming down. So that's typically like, you know, when you're practicing, you work a lot with that type of stuff. You know, when you're doing the Kabbalistic cross, that's basically what you're doing, right? Is you're bringing everything from above down below to clear everything out. And then he's got all these lines going everywhere. And then he's got, you know, I guess these are wings here at his feet. So bringing everything down from there gives him wings to fly, right, from the ground up. So it's and that's the whole point of like practicing magic, is to get from Malkuth all the way back up to Keter, you know, and cross the abyss, the transformation of alchemy. So to me, this card looks like a card of alchemy as well. Not just, you know, just beside that. To me, this card is like pure alchemy. So he's like starting the process of the alchemy, right? Transferring all the energy and cleansing himself repeatedly every day to kind of get to a higher state of being. That's the whole point of magic. And that's what these guys were doing. So it's kind of like when you're practicing this stuff, everything that they were doing that influenced them to create these cards, you can kind of understand it on a different level. You know what I mean? It's like, things become very apparent to you when you're doing this type of work, and it makes things, it's almost like you get downloads when you're practicing this type of, when you're practicing magic and doing your meditations and your energy work, you start to see things from a different light. And then this stuff, like, you know, the tarot cards, you start to understand what they really mean. So to me, like, just looking at this from an occultist perspective who practices magic, to me, this is an alchemy card for everything that he's got going on. And he's at this point where he has mastered the elements. And that's the first step in alchemy, is mastering the elements. So when you're practicing magic, that's the very first step that you go through. And then you do planetary work. And after planetary work, then you do zodiacal work. After that, you do angelic and demonic work. And then after that, you're going to hit the 4 fixed signs or royal stars. Then after that, you're going to start, you know, trying to do chin-ups over the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof R. So that's the whole point. So to me, this looks like the beginning stages of that process that he's going through in the elements. Like, you know, the elemental magic is the first process, mastering the elements.
Well,
excellent.
Yeah, right. Yeah. One thing I did want to mention, because you mentioned alchemy. And then after this, if you want to, you can touch on the Rider-Waite version of this if you like. With the the major arcana, the reason I even wanted to kind of cover them, this is just my opinion. You know, they fall on the paths on the tree of life. I think the spheres are kind of like something in form, and the paths is the alchemy and the change from the one sphere to the next. So to me, I feel like the major arcana is just all symbolism of alchemy and change.
Yeah,
so, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Just wanted to point out too, regarding that central pillar in the middle, that central pole, Mercury is the messenger of the gods. He's a trickster, you know, so many different things that he's related to. It's absolutely completely nuts and insane. There's a reason why different lodge groups and traditions and stuff revere him, you know, so much. Oh, yeah. But because he's a traveler, I think that this idea of the post, which that's also a post, this is where we get the post office from, and postage from, you know, it's messages being, you know, sent back and forth and things like that. So things having to do with travel and shipping and whatever, that's all very mercurial. And then also too, we, you know, a lot of like older merchants and stuff, like the merchant classes of the world, a lot of them had a mercurial sort of reverence, right? Which is interesting too. Mercury merchant, right? And it reminds me too also of like mermaid, you know, being half, you know, being a hybrid basically, half creature, half human. Mercury being very much the divine androgyne, you know, masculine and feminine and things like that. So also too, this post or that pillar has a correspondence with us in our spine, as in our spine. So our spine is the correspondence to the world axis or cosmic axis and to that post or pillar, right? Which is why, again, the Kundalini energy, you know, it's the twin serpents going up the spine and things like that. And I did some presentations recently relating our spine to like pine. Right. It's interesting that spine has pine right there, as in the pine tree. And then even the pine needle is pretty much the same symbol. It's just a very straight vertical kind of thing. Yep. And then even spine literally is an anagram for penis as well. So it's all just the same stuff, in my opinion.
I mean, even this
symbolically,
this was even something you mentioned pine. And again, you know, male, that could be a tree, male phallic energy. But, you know, when we were going to cover this stuff with Inside Your Head, I kind of, like me and the people that were covering it even was like wondering, like we were going to show how we think Christmas may literally be about what's inside your eyes. Because again, you're having pine cones, and then you're having those little, what are those things you put on your tree? Those candy canes. That's a rod. You're filling wreaths in trees with pine cones and candy cane rods. Just very weird.
Yeah.
You do that on your wreaths, which is the same thing as your, you know, just very weird. But the pine cone, I think, says a lot. That's a huge fucking symbol.
Pineal gland.
Yeah.
Your third eye.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and so I think too, what you see behind him above his head, you know, the winged disc. I'm not saying that this is always the case or whatever, but I think that there's a correspondence with your third eye, the pineal gland, and Polaris, the pole star, or
Yeah.
which is the central star, basically. So sometimes when I see the winged disc, it's not always a sun disk. Sometimes it's actually related to the pole star, basically. And so that's just my understanding personally. And so it would make sense that the pole goes up to the pole star, right? And so, but there's pole symbolism related to the sun and even the moon and things like that too. So it's kind of a separate rabbit hole, but I just thought I would point that stuff out.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to move on to maybe the Rider-Waite version to talk about, Megan, or are you good with this?
Yeah. We can do the full card with the Rider-Waite.
Okay. All right.
You want me to hold it up?
You mean the Magician, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we can do that, either one.
Yeah, the Magician. We'll do that one with the...
Mario, have you figured out what's on his bag? The full card?
No, I haven't.
Because
really
there
funny.
is like some debate. I have a mentor that's been reading tarot for like 30 years. She's old school.
Uh-huh.
And so me and her, we started studying and we were going to create our own deck. And we were trying to figure out what the hell that was on his bag. And it almost looks kind of like, one theory was, okay, it's an eagle. Another theory was it's a phoenix. But yeah, I wanted your opinion on it. You know, what that was there on his bag, the symbol, because it's like that one. And I even got a magnifying glass out at one point and we were trying to figure out what the hell that was.
Yeah, I just pulled out my photographer's loop.
Yeah.
So when I really want to get into a card, I do the same thing. To me, it does look like a bird.
That's what I thought too.
So it's a bird of some sort, I would say. What kind of bird? That would be another question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's not so much information, but that makes sense too. And then also the Fool, he has that that feather, the plumed sort of feather sort of thing coming out from his head. And so kind of, it would relate to that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking I want to say that like it's a phoenix, but I mean, because that would make the most sense, right?
Oh, the phoenix would be perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can see a few different things there.
Yeah,
and then the wheels, phoenix goes along with a butterfly in a sense, too.
Then the wheels that you have on his garments. The wheel always spinning.
Wheel in the sky keeps on turning.
Setting him on his journey.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I was just curious. Sorry to interrupt there. I know we were kind of going towards the other way, but I'm curious to see what like other tarot readers think that is. So I've even heard people say that they think it's an eagle's head, and I'm like, I mean, I could see that, but to me, a phoenix would make more sense. But I was just curious to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I don't know if many people know this or not, but it's kind of hard to see. So he's got an Ouroboros around his waist, for a belt, right? So that has symbolism there. The snake eating its own tail. Just for the people that don't really know, we'll kind of point some things out that, people that aren't tarot readers that kind of don't know a whole lot. So he's got, the snake eating his own tail as a belt. He's got the infinity symbol. Then the infinity symbol is also above the lady's head and the strength card as well. And so you have a lot. So like I said before, you have the pillar symbolism and the roses, the red roses blooming, into something new. And then now he's got the yellow in the background, right? But now he has red on. So red is, it represents a whole bunch of different things. You have red is a color of passion and fire and strength and kind of it can also represent anger, all kinds of different things, right? But I like that they put a red on him, and because it's such a powerful color. So you have to the thing that you need to get across with the Magician card is that he has power. He has brought down power from above, below, and mastered and grew his garden, if you will, the flowers that are at his feet. He's kind of at a point now where he's letting everything kind of bloom. And then you even have the symbols on the side of the table there. People probably have never really looked at that, but there's like a bird. And then I think maybe that's like water or mountains there on the table. Do you know what I'm talking about, Mario?
I see.
On the edge of the table there.
Yeah, it's like the same bird that we saw on the last two.
Yeah. Yep. So there's some symbolism there as well.
I mean, you do have, real quick, you do have more cones and rods too.
Yes, you do. Yes. Yes,
Totally.
you do, for sure. But you see he's wearing white underneath his robe, so that's still a sign of purity. He still hasn't made it through there yet. You know, he's only at the very first stages now. So some people think, you know, that the full card is at the first stages. It's actually before the first stages. It's when he starts to realize that there's more to this life than just what we see, hear, and feel. There's so much more that's there. And so this is actually, you know, the first card where he's actually putting his magic into action. And he's starting to create that. It's like a spark. It's like a flame that's still going. Are you familiar? I'm sure you're familiar with Pamela Coleman Smith and her Solabusca style of painting. And it's so hard because she did it that way that it's so hard to kind of see some of the symbolism that's actually in all these cards because. And I've heard people say that before that I was teaching. They're like, well, how do you know what all this stuff is? You know, it's not very clear. And at the same time, I tell them, well, it's not meant to be clear.
No.
You know, it's not meant to be clear. It's you're seeking. That's the whole point, you know. And I don't know if you've heard this before too, Mara. You probably have. But, like, she actually did this huge painting with all the backgrounds of all the tarot cards. It's a huge panoramic painting that she did. I think it's in London. And she has all the backgrounds to all the cards in that painting itself. I would love to get my hands on that to just kind of like delve into that painting. I mean, that would be, I'd study it for years. You know, I'm sure you've heard of that, right?
No, I have not. I would love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll see if I can.
Very cool.
Yeah. I need to see if I can get you that information somehow and kind of, but it's a huge, it's like feet wide. It's like 20, 30 feet wide. And it's like a few feet tall, and it's huge. And they have it in some museum in London, and it has and I've seen pictures of it, like, and it's everything in the background, like the mountains and the castles and like everything that's in the cards, even the minor arcana. So, yeah, so that's like a huge, big, you know, take a step back. This is everything. So she took little snippets of that painting and made cards out of them. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, she never got credit because she was a woman. You know, back in that time, she died penniless, broke, with no credit for all this work that she did. And then also for you guys that don't know, that squiggle line at the bottom, that's her personal signature on every card that you see as well. If you guys are wondering what that is, that's her signature.
Oh, that's like the guy who does the Iron Maiden things. He has his little weird signature for Eddie. Every one of his pieces of art. You know something I do want to mention? You know, I had mentioned the King before. I'm losing my, I can't think of what card goes. Maybe the King of Cups I'm thinking of. But, like, over by Chesed, I mean, you do have blue, and I do think that is where you start seeing a lot of, again, the cones and rod symbolism. And, again, like I was going to the point to where I do think that goes back to your eyes. That card is blue, and then when you start going up the tree even farther from that, like in this picture, the only blue you really see is around his waist. We have blue, red, and green colored cones in our eyes. So I'm wondering, like, is something to do with that cone changing and going just to the red and green now, because that's what's being shown primarily? It sounds crazy what I'm trying to get at, but I do even wonder if there's something to do with it.
I see what you're saying with that, because, you know, that video that you sent me with the eye symbolism, Mario, you would love that, actually. That video he sent me, and it's like a picture of that human eye and the inner workings of it and what it looks like. And so it looks eerily similar to the Tree of Life. The bottom and the top, there's like a shaft that goes up that lets us bring light into our eyes. Well, that's how we, you know, figure out the world, right, through our eyes. That's okay. So you talk about the perception of this world for us bringing down from above down below, and the only thing that we have to perceive this world is through our objective vision. So definitely that's, I mean, if you think about it, our eyes are the windows to our soul. It's how we perceive things in this realm. So I definitely agree with you. Like, you know, there's something to that for sure that has to do with our eyes. Yeah. Being able to perceive everything, because if we don't have our vision, we have our other senses, right? But if we don't have our vision, we can't receive light. And receiving light is the whole point, right? Yeah. When you're practicing, you're bringing down light, you're cleansing yourself with light, and the eyes catch light. So you have to be able to see this world in a certain light, if you will, to perceive its different dimensions, because everything is subjective or objective. When you're taking it in. Yeah. I think 100%, yeah. Symbolism is one way that we can see behind the veil.
I even wanted to add, and I don't know if they mentioned this. I think this was something I found on my own that wasn't in that video. Even if you were to look up, and this is even why I mentioned like Christmas as like a joke, but if you were to even look up how those cones are like wired in your eyes, it's like the same exact way our Christmas lights are done. Or these vines grow.
Sure. Oh, yeah, man. It's
very weird. Very weird.
It's all of what I'm coming across is that if everything emanated from a central location, when you look at the dot, if you look into dot symbolism, the idea is that it's a seed, it's an eye, it's a packet of energy that everything was expressed from and also returns to, just like the torus field. And to me, it's just like you're picking up on the nuts and bolts symbolism of the universe and the cosmos. Everything is an expression of this sacred center from which everything came out of. And the eye is also just a straight vertical line, like Roman numeral 1. Isn't it interesting that we're talking about eye symbolism and the power of the eye? Yes. And literally, we have the letter I, and it's just a straight vertical up and down line. And that corresponds with the world axis and everything else, too. And then even, I don't know if you guys have looked into the Bach saga sort of stuff. There's things I like about it. There's certain things I don't really care for about it. But long story short, it's an alternative history sort of thing. But they get into a lot of etymological wordplay sort of stuff about where modern words come from, where modern letters come from, etc. According to the Bach saga, the lowercase I is symbolic of the world axis, and the dot on top of the I is the pole star. And so I would say regarding Christmas symbolism, when you put a Christmas tree in your home, putting a world tree symbol, a Tree of Life symbol in your home, and when you're putting a star on top of it, you're putting Polaris on top of the world tree. That's how I personally look at it. And then where does Santa come from? The North Pole, right? So there's lots of northern, central sort of sacred center symbolism related to Christmas. Like, it's so thick, dude. Oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah, and so Christmas is like a pagan holiday, right? So they were practicing like an elemental watered down version of magic. And so that's how all that links together. I mean, even so you take all your pagan religions that only had a few snippets of what we're talking about, right? Of magic. So they had the more natural forms of magic, more earth-based magic, more all that stuff. So it's funny how the different people in different times, and especially pagans, they knew about this stuff, and that's where we get it from. It's like the root of all, the different holidays that we practice today, and we can go on a whole nother rabbit hole down that. But yeah, I totally get the whole Christmas Santa thing with that, and because it's actually a pagan holiday. And so yeah, for sure.
And if you even think of exactly Christmas, if you think about that again, you got the red and the green again, minus the blue. And like the Christmas tree, it's a very much red and green, and then like you got your silver and gold tinsel you'll wrap around the tree, which are both very good for electricity and conduction. Silver and gold. So I find it very interesting, talking about this stuff in that sense when it comes to Christmas. It's just
So we need to do a
Totally.
Christmas show.
Yeah.
All three of us. We'll do a Christmas
Oh yeah.
show.
I'm totally into it. That'd be fun.
Yeah, hell yeah. Probably upset
couple
us
of
few
quick
people,
things.
but
Regarding, just to kind of tie up some of my thoughts with all this, but
Sure.
you're talking about eye symbolism. I think it's very appropriate for so many different reasons. I like what you're putting out there with all of that, but just want to say that the eye receives light, but also projects light. So anything that's like a yoni sort of shape, an almond shape, a vaginal shape, it's both a projector and a receiver sort of thing. So I think that's something that some people kind of overlook. We tend to always think about it, receiving information, but it also projects information as well. It's a two-way street sort of thing. And then also, there are older illustrations when I was getting into my Decoding Chaos presentation where it shows God literally separating the elements with his hands. He's separating day and night. He's separating the elements. Sometimes it looks like he's untangling things. And so this is what the magician is doing here, is he's actually kind of emulating God in his own way. He's separating the elements. So again, he's separating the above and the below, but he's also connecting the above and the below as well. It's a twofold sort of thing. Also, the other thing I was going to point out, just because it looks pretty obvious to me now, that those look like lilies. Those white flowers look like lilies. And regarding lily symbolism, I really got into this during Virgo season, but there's a handful of myths where maiden, a virgin, Virgo, receives a flower, and this is the catalyst for her to give a virgin birth. And so the lily flower is symbolic, actually, of virgin birth symbolism. And in my opinion, I actually still think that this is a phenomenon. I think it existed in the distant past, but I'm actually not opposed to it still existing. And I think that potentially there may be ritualistic practices based around virgin birth, this whole entire concept. I don't know if you always needed a man to give birth to a child. I think that it's called parthenogenesis. This happens in the natural world. There's different animals that can have virgin births without the seed of a man. I think it's very powerful. I think it's very, very interesting for a lot of different reasons. And like I said, during Virgo season, I got into this. This is where we get the fleur-de-lis from, by the way. So like the New Orleans Saints symbol, the fleur-de-lis is a virgin birth northern symbol. So even on older like compasses and compass roses, literally north, the arrow for north is a fleur-de-lis. And so to me, I think there's things going on there that are kind of being alluded to here. It looks like it was very deliberate to include a white lily. And then I'll just say that regarding all of this, Virgo is ruled by Mercury as well. So it's one of the signs that's actually ruled by Mercury. And so I kind of see the magician and some of the cards in the major arcana as being the product of virgin births as well. And so I think potentially the magician is one of these figures. I think the hermit is one of these figures, which that card is actually ruled by Mercury, and Virgo as well has a correspondence with Virgo and Mercury. And so this is the whole thing with Christ, right? Being born of a virgin and all this other kind of stuff. But the lily rabbit hole is super deep. So I just wanted to kind of lightly touch on that for now, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad you brought up the lily. Isis is also associated with the water lily. So I mean, you even,
perfect.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you get the eye or the one.
Isis and Horus.
And even oh man, what was I going to go with that with the lily? I forgot.
Blue Lotus.
No, yeah, Isis and the water lily, and I was going to say something else, and I totally forgot now. Oh well.
Isis is a Virgo correspondence, in my opinion.
Oh, that's what it was. In the banishing ritual of the hexagram, you do say Virgo, Isis, Mighty Mother. So I could,
Exactly.
so I could see this.
Yep. Same figure.
Yeah, very interesting. And I do even think, like you mentioned before, with I guess like what's that symbol that the OTO oh god, what's that fucking? I'm forgetting it now. The Laman, the shape is in a like the middle of the Vesica Pisces, or whatever shape that is. You were saying before that's like sometimes shown to like a projective or receptacle for light. I think that's probably why, in my opinion, why I think sometimes you will see like your third eye vertical and in that shape over here, because I do think at that point you're taking in light, or you're redirecting light. I think you're projecting it inside your head instead of outside your eyes. as silly as that sounds. But I do think, like what you said with the how it can do both, I think that is the all-seeing eye. Be able to look in this world and be able to look into the other world.
Totally.
So,
Totally. Yeah. No, I'm into it, man.
And then even with that, like you were saying how virgin births. This is just my opinion. I do think a lot of times where it comes to what people consider sex magic symbolism, in my opinion, really actually isn't like physically screwing at all. I think it's just showing like changing of manipulations of energy. So like if you're just having energetic intercourse and not actually physically screwing, maybe that could be the virgin birth, death and rebirth.
Why not?
Yeah.
I could see that for sure.
All right, so maybe we'll do one more before we move on, before we wrap this up. I mean,
I mean, there's a few cards. I'm deep in the Emperor rabbit hole because of Aries.
I'll download that now.
And so there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the Emperor, but also too, if Megan had a card that she wanted to review, I'm happy to accommodate too. Nice.
There's the Emperor and the Thoth deck.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So the Emperor. So let me pull out my cards here.
Yeah, I'm gonna bust this out and put it up on the screen. Sorry about that.
Yeah, totally. So also grab the Rider-Waite version too, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's interesting to me. One of the first things that I noticed this year with it, I noticed it in years past, but I actually made a post about it this year. The Emperor in the Rider-Waite version, it looks like he is supposed to be symbolic of a central mountain. And so this is something that I kind of noticed in other cards as well.
Yeah. I remember watching your stuff on that.
Oh, nice. Right on.
Yeah, I remember watching, and I also watched the Virgo thing that you're talking about too.
Oh, sweet. Very cool. Yeah.
So here's the Emperor card.
You got it. Yeah, exactly. And so he has two mountains. There's two mountains on the side. And then to me, it looks like they encoded him being the central mountain. And there's all of these, ideas about a central world mountain. Sometimes it's called Mount Meru, which corresponds with the world axis. And there's the fleur-de-lis down below, on the floor. And so the fleur-de-lis to me really is symbolic of almost like energy manifestation, and I think that the virgin birth, sort of concept or idea pretty much is like right in line with that. It reminds me very much actually of Sophia and the Demiurge. If you get into Gnostic mythology and stuff like that, how she basically created her first male counterpart. And actually, you guys tell me, I just really strongly feel like I always go back and forth. Sometimes I'm like, did masculine energy come first? Did feminine energy come first? Is this a chicken and the egg sort of thing? Is it even worth debating? And then a lot of times, though, and I don't know if this is just because of my psychology or whatever, I'm like, it just makes sense to me that there would be a feminine sort of presence first.
I was going to agree with you there. I was definitely going to agree with you there. Yeah.
Feminine first. And so feminine first, in my opinion. And so the feminine created the masculine, basically. And which is really interesting. And when you look into a lot of tarot cards that are masculine, so quote unquote masculine in nature, it's really interesting that you'll see a lot of feminine symbolism kind of baked into it, especially in older versions of the card. That's one of the things I recently went over is all of these older Emperor cards.
Oh, okay, here he's back.
Yeah, sorry. Mario, we probably lost almost everything you said right there. So if you want to kind of start back over, and I'll edit all that out. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry, dude.
Okay. Oh, no. It's all good. Megan, if you wanted to finish your thought, if you were on a, in a flow or whatever, feel free.
She didn't even get to start. Came back so fast.
I was just going to try to, talk a little bit until you got back.
Got it.
But I was just going to say really quick that the Emperor card is a card of being barren, of in a barren state, because he's ruled everything so much to the point where he can't even grow. Everything's barren. It's dry. And that's kind of like how the meaning that I was taught in the occult way is that the Emperor he's done things to the point where he can't grow anymore because he's scooped everything up and the ground is barren. It's not fertile anymore. So to me, this card is very, very masculine. And it's like, it's a card of, you've got to be careful about everything that you try to, I guess, rule over. You know, if you do it to a point, you're going to reach a roadblock. You're going to hit a wall. And so to me, I kind of interpret this card for people sometimes, depending on what's next to it, as a card of you're at a crossroads here. You're at a point where you can't grow anymore. You've reached stagnation.
Very interesting.
Extent. Yeah.
I love that for a few different reasons. The Baron thing reminds me of a lot of the myths or storylines about Mars. And look at the color of this card, and then look at the planet that rules Aries, right? It's Mars, the planet of war.
Yep.
And so that is fascinating, the Baron thing, because there's all these ideas, too, that Mars once had life, or that humanity lived on Mars, and that something happened. You know, there's a lot of different ideas about what's going on with all of that, but it kind of lines up with that. And then you mentioned this crossroads thing. That's interesting, too, because we're dealing with the fourth card of the major arcana, so we're kind of dealing with the cross. And I see a lot of mercurial symbolism actually in this card too. I see it all over the place, so I can't help myself anymore. But Mercury also relates to the crossroads too. But yeah, I like that. All of that stuff is very, very interesting.
Okay, yeah, that's all I was gonna say until you got back.
I think it's
nice.
The whole
right
thing,
on.
I think that was great how you even like mentioned like the barren stuff. Like, you know, I see a lot of red in here, and you mentioned, you know, Mars, and obviously it's, you know, associated with Aries. You know, that would I'm even thinking like purification by fire. You know, that's like alchemy in itself, really. You're changing something from solid into, I guess, you know, flame and smoke. And to even tie into that, barren, I'm thinking of two things. Have you both seen the movie Mother with an exclamation point? Very Gnostic movie. At the end, what happens? It goes up in flames and it's completely barren. Everything's destroyed, just like Mars. You know, and then the new Scarlet Whore comes in and the whole thing starts all over again. But, you know, I that, and even, I don't know if you've ever seen I Pet Goat, but I even think when the guy shoots up from the ground and everybody gets destroyed, in a sense, I think that's showing the same thing. Everything, you have completely killed every other version of reality that you could be, and it's completely barren, and it's just you alone now. Something like that.
Excellent. Well, it even makes me think of the word baron, and to be like an oil baron or something, you know what I mean? And to have, you know, that influence or that power and that money, and, you know, controlling people underneath you and kind of being at the top of some sort of structure or whatever. I think kind of is related too.
Yeah, you can only get so far with doing that, right? You have to have other avenues. So this is like the big boss energy card too, you know, and it's like, yeah, well, eventually you're going to get to the top and you're going to hit that ceiling. So to me, this is also the point in Magic that you hit when you first start, and then you can't go anywhere for a while until you figure shit out. So it reminds me of this too.
Interesting. Yeah. And then also too, the ram, you know, they live at higher elevations. They're really great climbers. You know, and so ram hunting is a really expensive endeavor. For some reason, for Aries season, I got into ram hunting as just kind of like a research sort of thing. And it's really expensive. Like, it's a rich man's sport, because the places you have to go are hard to get to, and they're hard to just kind of manage, and, you know, just all of the equipment involved and everything else. It's a really big thing because you're going to such high elevations, you know. So the ram, it climbs upward. It's always ascending. It reminds me of the Central Mountain thing that I was talking about earlier, you know, with the Emperor actually literally being that central mountain, you know, in the Rider-Waite deck. And so that's all fascinating. But the thing I was saying earlier is that Aries has a strong correspondence with sacrifice. And I was saying it just reminds me of fire. In order for something to catch on fire, we need something to burn itself, right? So wood, right? We need something in order for that whole process to kind of get started. And so in a lot of ways, I think Aries corresponds with that, because it's the first sign in the astrological year. And so we need kind of that sacrifice in order to kickstart the whole entire process. And so There's biblical stuff about lambs being sacrificed. Obviously, you have the sacrificial lamb in the corner. I think the emperor, in a lot of ways, is pretty much the same sort of thing. I learned that there were cultures that would sacrifice their king or emperor during Aries season if they weren't basically pulling their own weight. And so this is where we get Beware the Ides of March from. Caesar, an emperor, he was sacrificed, he was killed during Aries season. Christ was crucified during Aries season. The whole Passover thing, you know, the first fruit, the firstborn, they were sacrificed during this time of year. And so Aries, in a lot of ways, he is that firstborn son. He is that first fruit, you know, in a lot of ways. And so he's the first sign of that year, of the astrological year. And so there's a lot of first fruit sacrificial sort of symbolism going on. Makes a lot of sense for Mars, the planet of war. Makes a lot of sense for rams that are always butting heads, you know, and they're fighting in order to mate and all that kind of stuff. So I also, one of the things I pointed out recently is that Globus Cruciger that a lot of emperors hold. It's like an upside down Venus symbol, right? And so what do people commonly say? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, right? And you have an upside down Venus symbol that he's holding. There are some groups, and this is what I use personally, there are some groups that instead of using the traditional Mars glyph for the symbol for Mars, they will actually use an inverted Venus glyph to indicate Mars. So in a way, that Globus Cruciger, that cross above that sphere, it's a Mars glyph, actually, but it's an upside down Venus glyph. And so I think that's kind of an interesting sort of thing. Yeah, so those are a few things off the top of my head. But I've been going in on it on my channel if people, you know, want to learn more.
I think even the whole sacrifice thing you were saying before, like there was stuff that you were saying that was making me think of that movie Mother, and even something that I've heard David Bowie even say before. I feel like at the end of that movie, things had got so bad that the only way, basically, he was always like, we have to try this again. We have to do this again. And the only way that was possible is if you sacrificed and burnt down everything you had just created, let all that go and started it all over again. I've even heard David Bowie say, like, as advice for people to have a good spiritual life, all your beliefs, burn them all down to the ground, your whole life, and rebuild the world you want to be in with the ashes that are left over. It really sounds a lot like kind of sacrificing everything you had just created for something new. You know? Right. No, exactly.
It's not uncommon. You know, this shield has like a double-headed bird. I don't know if it's necessarily an eagle. I don't know if it's a phoenix. But I have seen phoenix symbolism being associated with this card as well, you know, pretty much to your point sort of thing. I also think it's interesting, too, that lamb is holding that flag, and then pretty much almost at the same angle, the emperor is holding that scepter, you know, in his hand as well, which is a thing that is so common with people who are in positions of power, to hold that rod, to hold that scepter. You know, and I've gotten into this as well, but the idea that the rod or scepter or wand is like the ultimate symbol of power and authority, because it brings order, like I was saying with the world axis and everything else. So that's kind of a curious thing. I know Crowley talked about the fact that his crossed legs right there, it's supposed to represent the bottom cross of the sulfur glyph. So the sulfur glyph is like a triangle with a cross down below. So there's a sulfur component with this card for sure, which is one of the three like philosophical elements: sulfur, salt, and mercury. So there's all of that as well. Lots of solar symbolism you can get into with this card as well. You see what looks like a sun right behind his head, and then the crown, you know, it looks like it's kind of emanating those rays for sure. Also, too, there's a light ram and a dark ram. One is within like the rays of the sun or something along those lines. It's being kind of like lit up, and then the other one is a bit darker. He's looking towards the darker one, which I think is interesting too.
I like that there's a lot of twos in here. So you have two of the phoenixes. To me, those are phoenixes.
Sure.
We have two rams, two phoenixes, but only one lamb. I mean, so if you're talking about duality, if you're talking about male and female, you know, he's so masculine to the point where he needs to create a union of opposites to kind of go forward and create more.
It's almost very Janus-like too, honestly.
Yeah.
Yep, totally. Or like I was saying earlier, he could symbolically also be, he's kind of like a lamb himself, in a way, like a sacrificial lamb sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Lots of wars also start during this time of year. March comes from Mars. March is also what soldiers do. So literally just the word Mar and Mars, you know, it's all over the place. Martial, like mixed martial arts, right? Mars is even an anagram for rams, you know? So there's lots of interesting things when you start decoding the words of the planets and stuff like that.
Martial law.
Martial law. Yeah, exactly.
Was there anything else, Megan, did you want to maybe touch on the other deck, or it's up to you?
I mean, it's pretty much all the same things from the Rider-Waiter transferred over, except he may be missing a throne there, but I mean, that could be covered up by his garments.
You know what I even thought, like we were talking about, you know, fire and stuff. This may have been something maybe you would have gotten into if we did the Chariot, but like the Chariot, I'm wondering, like, is that him going to war and then becoming the king afterwards? You know what I'm saying, in a sense, because that is kind of going up the tree. The Chariot, the Emperor is a little bit higher. You do have, you know, I don't know.
For me, the Chariot is a card of doing your will. It's about determination through all odds. Really just, you know, charging forward to perform your will. So in magic, we call doing your will is basically like doing what you were put here on earth to do, no matter what it is, as long as it's helping you grow, right? So for me, that card is about just pure will, determination, getting to the end point of where you need to go. And then of course, you know, you have the symbolism in the middle about the, you know, the unification of the divine masculine and divine feminine, and then you have a little bit of Egyptian stuff in there as well too. So for me, that's a card of completing your true will, or doing your true will. The Chariot.
Yeah, I thought like the Chariot may like kind of represent like
oh, look, it's right on the bottom of my deck.
Nice.
I'm just
and
gonna
then of course you have all the
card.
zodiacal symbolism in there too, you know.
Totally, exactly.
I'll bring this up real quick since you mentioned it. Sorry.
You're reminding me of the fact that the Chariot in the Rider-Waite version, you know, he's in a cubic stone basically, and then there's also cards of the Emperor where he's sitting on a cubic stone. And so there is that relationship too. It's interesting that they're both seated, and then even Chariot, like chair, you know, there's something going on there. So just, to compare the two, I think is an interesting study. Few overlapping themes, I would say.
There he's got that Christmas ornament in his hand again.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It also used to be called a holy hand grenade.
Oh, see, this is even another reason why I think, like, well, I mean, it's obvious that the Chariot and the Emperor connect, because it's like you're going from one chair to the next now. You know.
Ah, right.
Like even if you look at like how the Chariot on some cards would look right here, how you have those. I guess those are goat heads. Sometimes you'd have those two things. They'd be horses though, or something else that's pulling the Chariot. Now you're not going anywhere, but they're still there, and you're sitting in a different chair.
Right. Yeah, I like to. One of the things that has been interesting to me, I would like to know your guys' take on it, but notice the little tiny sliver of a river in the background. You know, it's really hard to miss, and even in the Rider-Waite version, like the version I have at least, it's kind of hard to see, but here they actually, it looks a little more distinct there. So it's interesting that there is a little bit of water, a little bit of flow. And I'll just get this out real quick, but what I've noticed, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but what I've noticed a lot of times is masculine cards, when you really get into it, you're going to start seeing feminine symbolism, and then feminine cards, you're going to start seeing a lot of masculine symbolism, that we actually need those, the genders to explain the other, in a lot of ways, and which I think is kind of fascinating. So water being more of a feminine sort of thing, relating to the emotions and, you know, all of that. It's interesting that it's not entirely barren, but there's a little sliver there in the background. It kind of just, maybe it's a little hopeful or something. I'm not sure.
Well, he's emotionless, so he needs, you know, that for emotion purposes to kind of get his creativity back up to be able to, you know, move on from this barren land that he's created. That's how I would interpret that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even like something to do with legit, even down to current or flow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sure. The other thing I'll say, this is just my personal hunch. One of the things I really like about what Crowley did in his deck is that in the court card system, only the queens are throned. The knights are actually, which is the king correspondence in the deck, they're on horseback. And to me, this makes a lot of sense that the man, the patriarchal figure, would be on horseback, and the queen, the matriarchal figure, would be throned. It reminds me of like a beehive or something. The queen bee stays in the hive. The worker bees go out, collect the pollen. Traditionally, men go out, you know, bring home the bacon sort of thing. Men will go out and they'll conquest and they'll take over, you know, villages, or they'll do, you know, all of these different things. They might actually travel a bit more. That's alluded to in the court card system. So, but women, because they're so magnetic and because they produce children, they can rule from, you know, the confines of their castle or from their domestic situation or whatever. And so, in my opinion, the fact that the emperor is throned is actually kind of effeminate. You know, it's a little bit more of a feminine sort of thing. The fact that he's actually seated, that's more of a, that to me, that's more of a role for the queen, basically. You know, I think it makes a lot more sense for the queen to be throned and kind of idle that way and stationary, because it just, that's more of her role. Even just look at how our sexual organs work. So, you know, the sperm leaves the confines of man, goes on this journey to inseminate the egg. The egg actually stays within woman, you know, and the baby gestates and everything else. So men are definitely more so travelers than women, I would say, symbolically, traditionally. So
Yo, that's a really good point, though.
That's kind of how I personally look at it. The other metaphor I like to use is the bow and arrow. So the bow itself is more feminine, it's curvy, it's kind of receptive. The arrow is more phallic, and it's the arrow that leaves and takes off and penetrates, whereas the bow actually stays with the archer, you know. So just something to kind of chew on. So when I see the emperor kind of being thrown now, I wonder if it's alluding to kind of feminine symbolism, basically.
Well, it's putting him into form and keeping him there. In a sense too, and like even Isis, I mean, she's been depicted with a throne on top of her head. So
that's right.
I mean, I can't argue with your opinion on this. I actually find that very interesting. You know.
Yeah. So just a random thought there.
I wanted to talk about something really quick.
Sure, go for it.
So I had a huge aha moment last week. So I was watching Demystifying the Occult by Mark Passio. And he has a tarot. Mario, have you seen this? He has a tarot section at the end of his third video in the series of Demystifying the Occult. I think you should really, really check it out. I had a huge aha moment. So I was previously working on a Tree of Life spread that could be read, like, I think I counted like 17 or 18 different ways. But I didn't have all the information that I wanted, that I needed to kind of put two and two together. So when I watched that and the order that he put the cards, there's like two Tree of Lives, because you have, you know, 22 cards. So you have 11 and 11. And then, so it's like the magical path that goes up. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. That's what I need. That's the information that I was seeking to find. And I had this huge, I like freaked out. I had one of those moments where, like, you know, you just get like struck by lightning and you're like, everything just makes sense. So I took my cards and I put them out in the Tree of Life, and then I added an extra 3 on top for the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof R. And so I got my Tree of Life chart, put it next to the reading, laid everything out in the Tree of Life, and that was the most accurate tarot reading I've ever had in my entire life for myself. Like I was just like, oh my God, I have to figure, this is like the missing piece that I needed to complete that spread that I was working on. And so I laid them all out, and I was comparing the meanings of each Sephiroth to the position of the card. And I was also looking at the meaning from each pillar and like, you know, translating the meanings of the cards with the pillars and the Sephiroth. Please just do that. Like, get you a Tree of Life and get the meanings, and then lay your cards out that way, starting from Malkuth, the bottom, and then work your way up, side, side, middle, side, side, middle, side, side. And then get you an extra 3 for the outcome. And I'm just curious to see what happens when you do that, because nice. I was just completely floored, and I've figured it out. And so I'm gonna offer that as a reading. Once I get all the card placements figured out, I'm gonna have to line them all out, compare them to the Sephiroth, compare them to the pillar symbolism and meanings, and then read them from there. And I figure you could read it in the, you know, in the lightning pattern going up. That would be like the main read. Okay. And then you could read it like this, and then upwards, and this, and upwards and down. Like, there's so many different ways that you can read it. So that's what I'm working on right now, is developing that. And I kind of wanted to share that with you guys, because I can't explain that to anybody around me. They don't understand like what I'm talking about.
No, I totally get what you're getting at. Totally. I was like, damn, this is
like,
fucking
why
deep.
are you freaking out? And I was like, because like, you don't. And I even like tried to tell my mentor about it, and she was like, huh? And I'm like, I was like, so I don't get to talk to very many tarot readers. So I just wanted to like share that with you real quick.
Very
because
cool.
That was like a huge breakthrough moment for me, because it helped me kind of complete where I was going with that Tree of Life spread that I want to do. And it's probably going to end up being like an hour-long reading, and I'll like sell it as that, like a really in-depth reading.
For a fucking hour, yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, but I just wanted to see what you thought about that, and kind of recommend that to you. So it's part 3 in Demystifying the Occult. Mark Passio, start at 30:05 and then watch it till the end. And then that's where you'll find, I've watched it like 5 times. So I know exactly where it starts.
Yeah.
I was like, she write that down before the show? She wanted to tell you.
No. I will never forget it, because that was like a huge moment for me. I'll never forget that at all. That's
awesome. I mean, that's even like stuff where I was saying, it's funny how you said you got hit with like a bolt of lightning. It's like those downloads. It's like you get a download, and then I hate even using that phrase, but then you'll go look at your tarot and you'll be like, holy fuck, I didn't see this for the last fucking 10 years I've had this deck.
Yeah.
And it's like something hits you and you're like, oh my God, now all these other cards around it are starting to make more sense. It gets, I love that stuff. So
yeah. I just found it super fascinating, as a magician, trying, like, I was like, ha, okay, I fucking get it now. Yeah. So that's totally something that you need to look into for sure.
Yeah, I highly suggest to check out, even for you, Mario, or even for the listeners, I would definitely check out Mark Passio's tarot stuff. I think that's some pretty solid work. And like she was saying, he does put a different spin on it, where you're like, oh, damn, like, it's impressive stuff, so.
Oh, yeah, no. He blew my mind years and years ago with his, I don't know, he was talking about, like, occult symbolism and, with just in military and, like, the police force and stuff.
Yes.
Like, things that they were, yeah. And I had a chance to meet him briefly, and I've been to his conference that he put on.
Cool. How cool is that?
Times. Yeah. It was really,
I just
really good
stumbled
stuff,
across the guy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, he's put out a lot of stuff, so
yeah.
there's a ton to catch up with.
I guess we could probably wrap it up there too. I assume we're all done talking on those 3 cards.
Cool. Yeah.
All right. Plus we're also an hour and 40 minutes in. We'll wrap it up there, and hopefully within a few weeks, maybe we can all touch base and cover a few more, and we'll just continue going with this series. Thank you both very, very much for coming on. Mario, thank you for coming on again. I appreciate it. I know we've had some hiccups in the past, but I've ironed out everything, and there should be no more issues. And yeah. Well, I mean, not to get into it, but it was another reason why I had to let go of my co-host.
Gotcha. Yeah. Understood. No, man, I had a great time.
So thank you. And Megan, I really appreciate you coming on and adding your opinions and just your theories on this. Like I said before, I thought it was great. I thought we hit it off well last time. I thought when me and Mario and Lux had even talked about tarot cards. I thought we hit it off well. So this was like a real fun and exciting and informative show for me. Just not even for the listeners. For me, I thought this was great. So I thank you both. I had a great afternoon. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.